They told us the 1849 gold rush was the greatest opportunity in American history, a wild frontier where ordinary men struck unimaginable riches with nothing but a shovel and a dream. But the real story is far darker, because by the time the world heard gold discovered in California, the best claims were already taken. The easy gold was already gone, and a small circle of insiders was already getting rich. Not from mining, but from something much bigger, while tens of thousands of desperate men crossed oceans, deserts, and mountains chasing glitter in the riverbeds. Someone else, someone you never learned about, was quietly building the first true fortunes of the West. Fortunes that didn't come from panning for gold, but from the people who were. What happened next explains why almost no miner struck it rich, why California exploded overnight, and how the real winners of the gold rush became some of the most powerful families in American history. This is the part of the gold rush they never teach, and once you hear it, you'll understand exactly how wealth is really made. Stay with me until the end, and if you love hidden financial history like this, make sure to subscribe. This one changes the entire story. The story always begins the same way. January 1848. James Marshall notices something glittering in a river at Sutter's Mill, and overnight, the world changes. That's the version you heard in school, a rugged frontier miracle, a moment of explosive opportunity where anyone could strike it rich with nothing but a pickaxe and a dream. But that version leaves out the most important truth. By the time the world heard about that gold, the real money was already gone. In fact, the myth of the gold rush wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was deliberately shaped, polished, and sold. In the months before the news exploded globally, a small circle of landowners, speculators, and politicians in California were quietly positioning themselves for a fortune. They understood something the public did not. Gold rushers don't make miners rich, they make everyone else rich. And while newspapers later celebrated the brave 49ers trekking across deserts and mountains to chase glory, those papers never told readers that the gold fields were already being carved up. Claims had been staked, rivers had been diverted, prime spots were locked behind informal but very real control, and only a tiny group had access. By the time ships filled with hopeful adventurers reached San Francisco in 1849, the easy gold was already scraped off the surface. What waited for most of them wasn't treasure. It was chaos, inflated prices, and ruthless competition. Hotels, stores, and tools cost 20 to 100 times their normal price. The miners didn't understand they weren't entering a gold rush. They were entering an economic trap, and the architects of that trap, they were already counting their profits. San Francisco was transforming from a sleepy village into the fastest growing city in America. It was NT gold dust on the ground that built it. It was the river of money flowing from miners into the hands of businessmen, merchants, land speculators, and suppliers. In fact, many of the men getting rich never touched a shovel. Some never even left the East Coast. Meanwhile, the miners' stories, the ones in diaries, letters, and abandoned journals, describe a completely different reality. Mud, disease, hunger, broken dreams. Thousands died before ever reaching the fields. Most arrived penniless and left even poorer. And the few success stories, most of them didn't come from striking gold, but from exploiting the desperation of others. The gold rush, as we know it, was not a mass opportunity. It was a mass illusion. And the illusion had a purpose. California wanted population. The US wanted control of the Pacific. Merchants wanted money, and speculators wanted the frenzy because frenzy made them rich. This wasn't an accident. This was a business model. By 1850, more than 300,000 people had poured into California, each one imagining himself the next lucky prospector. But statistics tell a colder story. Fewer than 1 in 20 made enough gold to match what they spent getting there. Yet wealth was exploding everywhere, just not in the mines. The fortunes were flowing into the hands of men who had no intention of digging for anything except opportunity. The empire builders of the gold rush were the merchants. Men like Levi Strauss, who realized miners needed durable clothes far more than gold-dusted dreams. He didn't just sell denim, he turned necessity into an empire. Others followed the same pattern. Hardware store owners, blacksmiths, carpenters, restaurant operators, gambling halls, boarding houses. In a world where thousands arrived each week with empty hands and no tools, selling a shovel was more profitable than using one. And then there were the land barons, men who claimed miles of property before the rush began, then sold lots to desperate newcomers for astronomical prices. They didn't need gold. They mined human hope. San Francisco's landlords became millionaires renting shacks the size of closets. Some charged miners for access to rivers or creek beds they legally owned. Others sold lumber, water, food, and equipment at markups of 500%. Every miner who failed made someone else wealthy. But the real quiet winners, the bankers and brokers. As gold poured into the city, they were the first to buy it cheap, refine it, and resell it globally. They didn't risk their lives in rivers. They risked capital, and the returns were enormous. In many cases, they controlled the flow of gold out of California entirely. They decided the prices. They arranged the transport. They negotiated deals with the US government. They were gatekeepers to the entire system. Even Charles Crocker, Leland Stanford, and other future railroad tycoons got their start exploiting the cash flowing through Gold Rush California. They watched the miners struggle and realized something crucial. If you control infrastructure, transportation, and supply chains, you control the future. These men would later build the Central Pacific Railroad, and their first fortunes came directly from the gold rush economy, not the gold itself. Newspapers played their role too. Sensational headlines fueled the frenzy because every new migrant meant more customers, more commerce, and more political leverage for California. The rush wasn't a discovery, it was a marketing campaign. Meanwhile, the miners were living a harsh reality, working 12-hour days in icy water, competing with thousands, fighting over claims, facing violence, illness, and starvation. Most of the actual gold extraction was done by a tiny handful of early arrivals, and even they lost much of it to theft, inflated prices, and financial manipulation. But the truth becomes undeniable. The gold rush was never about gold. It was about the systems built around gold, and the people who built those systems, not the ones who chased the glitter, became the architects of America's next economic empire. The gold rush didn't just reshape California, it reshaped the global economy. But the real legacy isn't what you think. It wasn't the gold that made America wealthy. It was the infrastructure, the population boom, and the financial network built on the backs of hundreds of thousands of failed miners. By the mid-1850s, the easy gold was gone, but the cities that gold created were thriving. San Francisco became a financial powerhouse. Banks emerged that would eventually shape American capitalism for generations. The U.S. Mint expanded dramatically, and perhaps most importantly, California's instant population boom gave the United States leverage in global trade that it never had before. This is the secret few people realize. The gold rush wasn't a resource boom, it was a demographic boom. The gold didn't matter nearly as much as the people did. Hundreds of thousands of ambitious, desperate, hard-working men didn't strike it rich, but they stayed. They built farms, businesses, ports, railroads, and eventually entire industries. The real wealth was created after the gold disappeared. Agriculture exploded. Shipping lanes opened. The Transcontinental Railroad became possible because California suddenly mattered. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, the fifth largest economy in the world, all of it traces back not to gold, but to the illusion of gold. And behind the scenes, the US government benefited massively. The gold that was extracted allowed the US to stabilize its currency, expand its economy, and finance the next era of growth. It helped the US move toward becoming a global financial power. But the miners who dug it out, most died poor. Their sacrifices built wealth for bankers, merchants, and industrialists who understood systems, not treasure hunts. The gold rush was also a turning point in American propaganda. It proved how powerful a narrative can be. Strike it rich wasn't just a slogan, it was an economic weapon. It moved people, money, and nations. That same formula has been used ever since. Land rushes, oil booms, stock market frenzies, crypto explosions. The details change, but the psychology doesn't. The gold rush teaches a brutal lesson. Whenever you see a crowd chasing fast money, the real profit is already being made somewhere else quietly, systematically, and by people who got there long before the crowd arrived. The miners chased a dream. The merchants built reality, and the banking families built empires. The gold rush was never a story about opportunity. It was a story about exploitation, economics, and the birth of a new financial America. What looked like chaos was actually a carefully leveraged moment in history, one that created fortunes, not from gold, but from human behavior. And the next time you hear about a boom, a rush, or a once-in-a-lifetime chance, you'll know exactly who is positioned to win, and it's never the crowd.